And remember, once you rip that Band-Aid off, there is no turning back. So once you go to a private loan, you can't say, just kidding, let's undo that one. You can't. So make sure that you are very set in stone here before you make that transition from federal to private, because again, we can't undo that once it's done.
Welcome to the Physician Sense Podcast, a podcast designed specifically for physicians, offering a breakdown of complex financial topics to help you develop your financial IQ, further your financial journey, and improve your well-being. Whether you're a medical student, resident, fellow, or attending physician, you're sure to learn something new that will benefit your journey. And now, your hosts, Chad Chubb and Tyler Olson.
Welcome to another episode of the Physician Sense Podcast. I am your co-host, Chad Chubb, with my fabulous, wonderful, fantastic, the man who is making progress on his drywall, Tyler Olson. And if you were listening to the podcast and you're thinking, what is he talking about the drywall? It has been a fun journey watching Tyler slowly chip away at finishing his office upstairs. And if you look right above his head, the drywall is slowly coming together. And it has been fun to track. From my side, from your side, again, a little pitch here, a little plug for our YouTube channel, because we're live too. We're live. So this episode, Tyler, this is going to be a fun one. We're about a month after Match. And the title of this one, we're going with Match Now What? And we got some fun topics in here. But before we get into that, how are you doing, my friend? What's the latest? How's life? Drywall's looking good.
Thank you. Well, and I would like to thank our kid because he's contributing to the effort. That's part of the reason why we're taking a very intentional and slow approach. This is it's actually super cool because I never thought that a 6-year-old could be taught how to do drywall, but here we are. It's coming along. But life in general is good, and I love this time of year because it's so cool seeing the energy coming from the graduating med students who found out where they're going for intern year, and had a great webinar a couple weeks ago. It's really cool to be able to field people's questions. And so we wanted to memorialize that with some specific action items today that you can follow as you graduate med school and transition into intern year. We're going to be talking about federal debt, private debt, making an emergency fund, and getting started with the right kinds of disability insurance. And so, we got lots of great things to talk about. Like at this point, like the middle of April, there's stuff to do, but there's some things that you can't do yet. And like the federal student loan stuff, we want you to pay attention to what to do, but you're not going to be able to do anything about it until after you officially graduate and your school has updated your status in the registry as graduated, because otherwise it's like your federal student loans are still status in school, right? Are you still a fan of the immediate consolidation to jump into an IDR?
I am. And I was just thinking we should probably make a note that Tyler and I are recording this in February. And why do I note that? Because between the time that we record this and the time that this goes live, we have no idea where student loans will be. So fun little disclosure there. But to your main question, Tyler, yes, I am still a fan of that. I just think it makes the most sense based on where income was, how public service loan forgiveness works. Even if you're thinking you might go private practice, like you might as well start the clock just in case. So I am still a big fan of that. And to your point, like a lot of the things we'll cover today, they might be more or less you start making your to-do list, but you'll be a lot less stressful come July, August when you're like, all right, here's my to-do list. Here's what I got to knock out to get ready to become a resident and get ready for all the moving parts that come with my next chapter of life and my medical journey. So bringing it back to student loans, IDR plans, yes, that's our still go-to advice as we sit here today in February. We'll see what it looks like come release time in April. But yes, that's where we're at today.
Yeah. So the steps are the following. You graduate from med school. You confirm that your status has been updated as graduated. This now allows you to take your federal student loans, all of them, your graduate loans, grad plus loans, if you have undergrad loans still, other grad school loans that you might have, not parent plus loans. So if those are something on your mind, those are your parents' loans, not yours. Now, in spirit, they might be yours, and that's great if you're like working with your folks to sort that out. But in terms of the practical decisions that can be made now, we're not talking about the Parent Plus loans. All of your personal federal student loans can be consolidated into a consolidation loan. The reason why we often recommend this to graduating medical students is because if you do nothing, the default process is for all of your loans to go into a 6-month grace period, at the end of which you will have had to choose an income-driven repayment plan or get put into the standard 10-year repayment plan if you didn't choose an IDR. And it's at that point that your payments could begin to count toward public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF. And this is, these are months that many of you are working for a nonprofit organization already as of July 1. Now, the exception of those of you that work for HCA, if you're at an HCA program, that is a for-profit program. And so those of you in there or like in other for-profits, then this would not be applicable. But the far majority of you are working for nonprofits. And so getting your PSLF payments started sooner than mid-November, mid-December, thereabouts, might be beneficial to you. And the only way to jump out of the 6-month grace period is to consolidate all of your federal student loans by going to studentaid.gov, logging in, applying for a federal loan consolidation, and within that consolidation application, you will choose an income-driven repayment plan. Now, along with what Chad said, because of the timing of things, I cannot say for sure which ones were going to be there. I would presume that SAVE will not be there, or at least it won't be a wise option. The most likely option, I think, is that most people should go for a graduating medical school would be IBR. Don't you think? Based on what we know now?
Yeah.
Unless they have some straggling loans from like before 2014.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other thing too. Like as we start to transition years too, like I'm always like, hey, pay is a good option. As we start to kind of transition those years, we also need to keep that in mind. Because now we're into new IBR compared to old IBR.
Right.
Again, that's based. If you don't super nerd out on student loans, which I hope most of you do not, but there was an old IBR and a new IBR, but it's all based on the year essentially that you graduate or when you start to accrue loans. So yeah, new IBR is likely going to be for where we are today, the new front runner in there.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming that we have that in the next few months.
Right. Yeah. So
yeah, we have to have some type of plans, right? I can't imagine we just go to like a one plan system. It kind of feels like we're just going to kick SAVE out and kind of go back to what we had, which, even talking through like what we had before in the Trump administration, like we had those plans before. So there wasn't like a witch hunt per se to get rid of those. So I'd like to think they're going to stick around, but only time will tell.
Yeah. Yeah. In any case, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing to note why this is so important too. It's essentially just a game of trade. So by you enrolling sooner, your income was likely very low, if not zero. So you're going to collect 6 of those 120 vital payments earlier. Think about where you're cutting those from. You're cutting those off the back end when your income would have been much higher. So it's a pretty good arbitrage when you think about it, especially depending on where you are specialty-wise and where your pay was when you finish up there. It could be a pretty significant trade value when you're getting rid of payments based on zero income versus, maybe a couple $100,000, depending on where you were in the payment track and how long your training was and all that. So it's a really important conversation. Now, if you're like, well, I have a 10-year training program, so it's not a big difference. That's not common for most people. Those last few years, you're like an attending. So you're trading extremely low income for, all intents and purposes, very high income. So that's why this little move is really important. Yes, it's 6 months earlier for PSLF, but it's the trade that you're making and the arbitrage you're getting out of that.
All right, Chad, enough with the jargon. Arbitrage. What is arbitrage? What is it?
It's funny. I don't even think that's a cool word anymore. It's just saying that if your payment was supposed to be $100 per month, and now when you would have finished up PSLF, the payment would have been say $2,000 a month. You have $1,900 per month of arbitrage, right? Where you traded for the higher end for that lower end. So you beat the system per se. Arbitrage to me, I don't know the official term of it, but I would say it's beating the system. So wherever you can beat the system, it's a win. So this is one of those unique little arbitrage moments, which I didn't even realize how nerdy of a word that was until you just called me out for it. But that is a little bit too technical jargon. I don't even like technical jargon, but just think of you as winning the game. You're winning the game when you implement that.
Let me give you a real life example of me as a 16-year-old engaging in arbitrage. Are you ready?
Yes.
So I lived in Michigan when I was late in my teens, and we couldn't buy fireworks in Michigan. But you know where we could buy fireworks? Indiana.
Mm.
So there were a couple occasions when I went down there and I stocked up on a bunch of fireworks.
Mm.
And I went and I sold them. I don't even know if that's arbitrage though, because it's not like, well, you know what? It is arbitrage because my friends up there, they would have had to pay an unlimited amount of money to get fireworks because they're not legal up there. But what I did is I paid for them down there and then I sold them for more than I paid for them up there. Is that arbitrage?
Either that or just a criminal activity. I hope that no law enforcement are tuning into this episode. Tyler's just joking. He never did that. He would never
No.
buy legal fireworks and drive them across state lines.
It was just an illustration.
Yes, illustration purposes only, but it is a great idea. We had a similar, we couldn't buy them in Pennsylvania. Funny thing in our area, if you could produce anyone with an out-of-state license, though, there was actually a manufacturer like in the state of Pennsylvania. So long as you had someone with an out-of-state license, you could still go and buy illegal fireworks and then have them in Pennsylvania. That was for Pennsylvania. But if not, you got to drive pretty far south. I forget. I think we had to get down to Virginia, maybe. So a few years I did that with my dad as a kid. But again, arbitrage, great way to bring in some illegal firework activity for both of us. So it's a win. Yeah. It's a win.
As well as saving some on your student loan payments.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, this is a long game of trying to maximize loan forgiveness by doing the exact same amount of effort that you would have otherwise. Now, if you're in a situation where you're not going for PSLF, like you know that you will not, and there are some of you who have approached me in like DMs on Twitter or like, I've only got like $110,000 in student loans. And that is not a strong case for PSLF. Now, you still could get like maybe like, I don't know, $10,000, $20,000 in forgiveness or something like that. But in a lot of cases, it's just not something that's going to be a major driver. So if you're in that situation where you're not going for PSLF, another reason would be if you are committed to going into private practice after training. And say you're intending to be a cardiologist and you want to open up your own practice. It's only going to be 6 years of training, right? 6 years? I think 6 years for cardiology, general cardiology. And then you would have to work in a nonprofit for 4 more years after that. But if you're committed to opening up your own practice, you're not going for PSLF, you wouldn't necessarily have to do this. So, but this is for any of you who know that you're going for PSLF, or you think that the door should be opened and there's nothing, it's not going to hurt you to do this consolidation.
Yeah, that's usually we kind of go with the latter of that. Like, even if you think you're going to go private, because it's such a long training period for physicians that we usually like, hey, just start the clock just in case, right? Worst case scenario, we'll move them over, we'll pay them off more aggressively. But even the way you get some of the benefits on the interest accruing on the IDR plans, it's usually a good route keeping them on the federal side. I know we even kind of discussed this pre-show notes, but I think for a lot of you, even if you're thinking about going private practice, it's a long training period. Heck, we'll sometimes even say, Tyler, I don't know if you guys use the same rhetoric, but we'll always kind of tell our clients that even once they go to a practice, if it's a private practice, like don't do anything even in that first year. Let's kind of make sure you get there, you like the partners, you like the practice, like you're in a good spot. Because we have had times where physician says, I'm going private practice. Let's move these over to private loans. And then once they get out there, they're like, I don't really like it. And all of a sudden they end up back in academic medicine. And remember, once you rip that Band-Aid off, there is no turning back. So once you go to a private loan, you can't say, just kidding, let's undo that one. You can't. So make sure that you are very set in stone here before you make that transition from federal to private. Because again, we can't undo that once it's done.
Yeah, good advice. And then there's the matter of private student loans, trying to figure out what to do with those. And you really need to monitor the terms because every institutional loan, every private loan has different terms, different interest rates. You need to pay attention to what those rates are. And like some some institutional loans, they don't require you to make a payment for several years. But if the interest rate on it and the interest is accruing during those years is like 12% or something like that, that's going to amass a lot of debt over time. So you might want to look at alternatives. I think of Earnest, one of our sponsors. They offer a really great low rate. But on the other, and then there's other lenders too, like Laurel Road. They have a $100 a month deal where you can refinance your loans, or get personal loans and get a $100 per month payment. So it kind of depends on like what sort of budget you're working with, as well as the state of your existing loans. And this is only for private loans. For federal loans, almost everybody should just stay in that umbrella. But if you have private student loans, you have to make this evaluation of what interest rate you're paying and if there's a better option out there in terms of interest expense or terms. I tend to say, though, if you've got a term that allows you to not make any payments while you're in training, that interest rate would have to be awfully high for me to recommend refinancing, because the name of the game is like being able to tread water while you're in training. Because like you're about to make your first paycheck. For many of you who've never had a full-time job until now, like, yeah, you're going to be making in $3,500, $4,000 a month. That's great. That is not going to take you very far. So if you can avoid extra debt payments, I do tend to say, try to make the waters calm. Try to avoid making things more expensive, just to try to eke out a little bit more savings on interest expense. I'd say prioritize treading water. What do you think?
Yeah, and with all of these too, you get a few quotes. I'm always a big fan of 3. I think you should get 3 quotes. But to Tyler's point, if one has some type of true no payments, and we've seen some weird banks like, oh yeah, there's no payments, but then you look at the fine print, it's like, yeah, but we're still charging interest the entire time. So that's not what we're looking for. You're looking for essentially a lot more flexibility in that, but get quotes from numerous providers, do the math on lower numbers versus maybe a smaller payment, as Tyler noted there, just kind of treading water. The whole goal of residency and fellowship is just don't mess anything up, right? You're just trying to tread water, get through that. Big kid paycheck is coming. You're making great money. I know you're not paid fair. I say this, Tyler, you could probably laugh, and I say this every time we talk about money while in training. You're not paid fairly for how much work you're doing, but at the end of the day, you're making a good wage compared to like what we consider, good income in the United States. So you have money to work with, but you're still trying to tread water. Don't do anything silly. And then once that higher paycheck comes in, a lot more resources to go to work for you.
Yeah, good call. And then, private student loans aside, like, credit card debt and budgeting kind of start to go hand in hand for me, because if you have credit card debt, that's something that needs to get sorted out. Yeah. Absolutely. Like, I know sometimes like when you're in this transition, so like when this episode comes out, y'all are probably starting to tap out of your last student loan disbursement in January, and you might be looking at 0% interest rate credit cards in order to pay for stuff between now and when you get your first paycheck in July. And that can be a good option, but you just have to have a plan for paying it off, right? Because like that's going to turn from 0% into like 22%. So building the budget involves writing out your expenses. So, you're probably looking around at either apartments, or for those of you that are buying a home, your mortgage payment, whatever those expenses are. Yeah, I know. I know.
One slip that easily? All right. I'll let it go then.
No, I mean, okay. So here's the thing with buying a home. Like it's, I get people that like, they're like, but does it depend on how long I'm in training? Absolutely. Yeah. Like there's some people who know that they're going to be in the same facility for the next 7 years. Okay. Yeah, I get it. For those of you that are in family medicine or like EM and you're going to be gone in 3 years, I'm not so great on that, but it is an example of something that some people do. I do recommend interns buy a home before new attendings buy a home in a town that they've never been before, though, because at least the intern is stuck for 3 years at least.
Yeah.
But anyway, whatever your living expenses are, you need to itemize those. So once you've itemized your expenses, then you've got to look at your income. And so you can go to an online calculator, look up what paycheck calculator, just Google that. That works. I will plug ChatGPT here because I think that is definitely something that's worth mentioning in terms of this sort of analysis. It's pretty helpful. in any case, you input what your gross salary is, 60,000, whatever it is. And then you can input like your state, like what you're in. If your state charges income tax, it can give you an approximate paycheck amount that you're going to get. And so even though you're not yet working and you haven't gotten your first paycheck, this is how you can build a budget. You've itemized all your expenses. You know what living is going to cost you. And then you have your paycheck to show how much money is coming in. And the difference between those two, if it's negative, then you are spending more than you're earning, and that you will drive yourself further into debt, either with credit card debt or personal loan, some other types of personal loans of some kind. Or you're breaking even, or you have a modest net savings. This reality is your starting place, and it is not indicative of your quality of person. You are a fantastic person and you're learning to be a doctor, and living is expensive. You just have to be reasonable in your expectations about what you can adjust in order to get what you need without spending unnecessarily on things that you're not really deriving value from or that you don't really need. But this evaluation is important because if you have credit card debt, this is where it gets inserted into the equation, because that's an expense. That's something that has to get paid off. And it's going to come down to, if it's like a large amount of credit card debt, you may not be able to do anything about it. And trying to just like muscle through it, like with an income of $3,500 a month, may not be feasible if you've got $30,000 in credit card debt. You might have to look into refinancing into a personal loan. And that's why we have our resources page, because we want you to have good places to go. Like, I know Laurel Road has a decent personal loan option for like $100 a month. So the rate that you're going to get isn't necessarily going to be super low, because interest rates are kind of high right now, at least as of now. And it's going to depend on your credit score. But the thing is, like with this sort of activity, you need to be proactive about it, because your credit score will only get worse if you don't do something about it sooner. So if you have a decent credit score now, it might be worth looking into something like this in order to escape the extremely high interest of a credit card account and get yourself onto like a personal loan that has a more manageable rate and like a monthly payment that you can afford while in training. So I know it's a lot, but that's what you got to do.
I know we've noted this on some past episodes before. Credit card debt, while in a perfect world, of course, we avoid it. Medical school is tough in terms of just managing everything. Some of you will have really good family support. You'll never have to worry about this. Others, there is no family support. You're out on your own there, not only going through the expensive cost of medical school, but also just living and other things that come up, even through training, right? Residency, fellowship, again, paid a fair wage in terms of like US standards, but for what you're putting in work-wise, no. So, Tyler and I both, we've discussed this on past episodes. It's not uncommon for younger physicians to come to us and have some credit card debt. That's okay. That's normal. It's just, how do we address that going forward, and making sure that you're starting to address it via budgeting. But even once you get that big kid paycheck, as I always like to say, once you become an attending, putting that high on your list there, because even the best credit cards out there, you're probably still paying 18, 20%. It's not uncommon to see, mid 20s, if not low 30s, depending on where your credit score was. So it's one that needs attention very early on. And again, it's, I keep saying on some of these past episodes, right? Not the sexiest topics, but these are foundational pieces, right? You need to have these organized, you need to get a good spot. And the good thing is for most physicians, right? Once they get this debt part organized and it's out of their way, fortunately, because of your higher income, they usually don't come back into play, right? So especially student loans, right? Once you get those out of your way, ideally they're done. But even credit card debt, historically, when we've had a new physician join us a little bit younger, get the credit card debt paid off, attending pay, we usually don't have credit card issues going forward. Not to say that that's the case for everybody and everyone will have their own journey, but getting these addressed, getting them organized at the start should have you on a much better path than going forward. But they're important. Just from the rates alone, it's really the highest form of debt you can have. It's because it's unsecured. We call that unsecured debt. There's nothing backing it, right? If you go take out a home equity loan per se, your business will back it. If you go your home will back it, not your business. But if you have a business, also, the home will back it. Or if you go take out like a collateral loan and you have a large investment account, the investment account will back that. On a personal loan, it's just you. And that's why you'll see those much higher rates with these credit cards. Even some personal loans will crank up there as well.
Yeah. Now, once you've sorted these things out, then you also want to look into some other ways to protect yourself and to build wealth over time. if your program offers a 403b, and particularly if they offer a matching contribution, which means if you put in a percentage of your income, then the employer will match that same percentage. Could be something like overall could be like 3% of your salary. So if you're making $60,000, it'd be $1,800 a year. You should absolutely put that $1,800 in over the course of the year. So that's going to be divided by usually 26 paychecks, or sometimes 12 paychecks if you get paid monthly. So it's not all like $1,800 all at once. It gets spread out. But if you do that, then the employer commensurately puts in $1,800, which is essentially a pay bump. So you should take advantage of that. And then the other thing is you want to look into disability insurance. Yeah. You really need to get this cared for. A lot of programs offer guaranteed standard issue policies. And the issue with this is transparency, because a lot of the GMA offices, they don't even know that these exist. And I was talking with Michael Relvis about this the other day to just more fully understand why it's hard to find out. The reason why is because the relationship that makes the GSI, the guaranteed standard issue policy, available. Well, let me back up. GSI, what is it? It's a way for you to get disability insurance without having to go through medical underwriting. That's a really important thing to get, because if you go apply for a disability insurance policy and you get denied, it makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get coverage in the future for any type of policy. So a lot of residency and fellowship programs offer a GSI. Yours may or may not, and you need to find out. You can ask us if you ask a question through our Google form, or if you message us on Twitter or on our Discord channel, we will help you sort out if your program offers that. In any case, Michael Relvis, one of our disability insurance agents that I've known for years, he was telling me the reason why it's hard to find out. Like residents, they'll ask their GME, they'll be like, "Hey, do we have a GSI?" And they won't know what they're talking about. And it's because the contract is between the insurance company and a specific insurance agent. Mm-hmm. The insurance agent has pitched the idea to make a residency program something where the insurance company will offer a GSI to residents or fellows of that program. And they don't need the program's permission. They don't need their direct involvement. It's an entity. And so the insurance company and the agent, they have this agreement, but then it's up to the agent to make it known to the residents. And sometimes they just don't get around to it, or they don't get around to telling everybody. And so the agents that we have on our resources page, like Stephanie and Larry and Michael, they all know all of the GSIs. And so anytime a resident or fellow asks me, I go to them and I ask them just to confirm, because it's important that if your program offers this, you should get that first.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've always been amazed when we would have a physician ask GME or even HR, like, "Hey, do we have this?" And they're like, "No." And then we'd send a note to Larry, Michael, or Stephanie, and they're like, "Oh, no, they do. It's Fred Smith at, Insurance XYZ office on Main Street." You're like, huh. So that makes sense. And I could see how that kind of gets lost, or if there's ever a transition. So that makes a lot of sense. And that's also why, we've always noted, right? Go to a good independent insurance broker who is trustworthy, and they're not going to try to say, "Oh, you don't need a GSI. Let me give you this shiny product instead," because they'll know that list again, kind of using our resource page. But it's so important. And we have plenty of great episodes on GSI, a great episode with Larry where we really dug into it. But, you only have access to this while you're in residency, fellowship, and a little short window after. And if you miss that window and you really needed that could be a life affecting moment there. Heaven forbid you'd ever need disability, but even just the peace of mind of having that there if you missed that opportunity. So that's an important one. So as you're listening to this, you just match, you got the great news a month ago, have that on your short list of things to do once you officially get fired up there in that intern year.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So there's always more details and minutia we could get into in terms of financial planning, even for residents. But these topics that we've mentioned to you today, they are the most important. Your federal student loans, your private student loans, credit card debt if you've got it, making a budget and saving if possible. Oh, we didn't talk about an emergency fund, right?
We did not talk about emergency fund.
Yeah. So that's kind of in line with the budget plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're basically like, if you are able to secure a net savings per month of X dollars, whatever it is, income minus expenses equals what, try to build up. I aim for like $1,000 to start.
Yeah.
$1,000 is a great goal. If you achieve that and you keep going, get up to 1 month of expenses. That is your emergency fund that you pay for just in case something happens and, things in life happen.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Start slowly building that up. That's actually another good plug for Laurel Road too, because they're our main banking sponsor here, but they have a good interest rate account. We won't say the interest rate because those change quite a bit. So by the time we record this and it goes live, the rate will change, but good high yield rate on that. That's again, one of those cornerstones you need not only while you start your training, but also as you journey through the rest of life. Emergency fund is so important. So yeah, we literally had that on the show notes, completely skipped over it, but that is definitely vital, in that budgeting phase. And even if it's just $100, $50, $25 a month, auto put into that emergency fund, a separate bucket. I always like it to be a separate bucket. That is a good habit to start to build now. And then when, again, you get that big kid paycheck, then you just increase the amounts. You keep those good habits going. You got yourself a good system in place.
So that aside, the investing into your program's 403B plan and being able to capture an employer match if that exists. Even if it doesn't exist, I'll mention this too. Some residents ask me about making Roth IRA contributions, and it gets complicated because if you're married and you decide to file taxes separately because of student loan decisions, and that's a whole nother topic, making Roth IRA contributions all of a sudden becomes a problem. So if you are thinking about investing in a Roth IRA, first check and see if the 403B plan at your employer, if they offer a Roth option. Because not only does that not have any relationship to tax filing status, you can do that whether you file separately, married or not, into a Roth 403B, but it also is automated. It comes out of your paycheck, and it's not something that you have to do on a supplementary basis. So, that's a really good thing to look at. If you're in a position where you can make Roth contributions, start with your program's Roth 403B. Plus, the limit is higher, $23,500 for 2025 versus $7,000 for a personal Roth IRA. So that's a good option to go with. And then lastly, the disability insurance piece and getting a GSI. I think that's enough homework for you all. What do you think, Jim?
That's a good list. And like you said, we could add a lot more to this. We could add a lot more layers to it. But if you come through this and you're like, I got my student loans organized, I got any private debt organized, I have a good budget in place, I'm starting to get money into my emergency fund, I'm taking advantage of the 403B match at least, and I just talked to the GSI agent, and I'll have that policy in place in a few weeks. You have crushed the match now what to do list.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. All right, y'all. Well, let us know if you have any questions. As always, we welcome your questions. You can fill out our contact form and ask questions of any variety within the realm of personal finance. And because there's a lot of stuff we don't know. But ask us questions anytime. And Chad, it was great talking with you. Good to see you again, my friend.
Always. Likewise. I'll see you on the next one.
All right.
This information is for general purposes only. This information is not intended to be a substitute for specific professional, financial, or tax advice, as individual concerns vary. Please see a financial professional, CPA, and/or an attorney in regards to your own individual situation. Wealth Wheels Advisory Services and Financial Planning offered through Vicus Capital, Inc., a federally registered investment advisor. Olson Consulting, LLC, offering advisory services and financial planning, is a state-registered investment advisor.